Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Austin Linney with Construct Your Life, and I have the pleasure of having Eric in the house. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Austin. How are you today?
I'm doing good. So I say the same thing all the time. Well, first of all, I think I've said the same thing 7 podcasts in a row. I don't need a booking agent anymore because Matt Drinkwater does it for me.
Right.
But Drinkhead. But more importantly, when I was reading through your email, I purposely don't do a lot of groundwork on my guests because I want to be surprised. I want to hear their stories the same way they are. But, when you start mentioning, Mark England and a couple things like that,
Sure.
You pique my interest. So it sounds like we have we ran in the same circles, but haven't met personally before.
Yes, indeed. I think we know a lot of the same people for sure. For sure. Matt being one of them.
I love it. So here's the rule with anybody. So are you an enlifted coach or have you gone through the program?
So I've gone through 2 levels of enlifted certification. Yeah.
Me as well. So here's the rule with the enlifted crowd is that be careful when you go over to their house because there's no chance you're just hanging out. You could be in a fist of strength in the backyard, within the next hour, right? It's like you better bring all your attire. Like they're always, working out.
Yeah, no doubt.
I told Mark the other day, I actually talked to Mark the other day, and I don't know about you, but I was looking for a community of people who respected the craft, but didn't take themselves too seriously.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's I've never been a corporate guy. That's not my bag. And I respect the work put towards the craft, but also having a good time in the same vein.
Right on. Yeah. The Enlifted group, I'm trying to think of how I got introduced. So one of my early coaches, Jennifer McMaster, was Enlifted certified. And she, back when it was called Storywork, before they even branded it Enlifted. And she took me through some exercises that I found super valuable. And then another gentleman that helped me as I got my podcast started, Maralda. Dennis was also, they were talking same language, but they were using different words. So he was calling it Enlifted and she was calling it Storywork. And I'm like, sounds really similar. And so I think I asked him and he's like, yeah, it used to be called Storywork. Now it's called Enlifted. And that led to someone else. And I think Angelo Cisco, who was good friends with my coach, Rick Alexander. And Angelo.
Rick's the man.
Yeah.
I've had Rick on like 6 times.
I heard one of them.
My other podcast that we had with and then Angelo, I've been on Angelo's like 3 times, and then I've had him on mine.
Yep.
Been down in Southern Cal at his place when he was there. But yeah, I mean, just great people. Really taught me a lot when I was trying to learn just about personal development stuff.
Right.
Rick and Angelo and all those guys were kind of the first that I met.
Definitely. Yeah. Great guys. Love Angelo. I was on, had him on my show. Rick was my first guest. He was my very first episode. I just last week, number 70, I launch a new episode every Wednesday.
Rick's one of those guys that makes me better when I get off the podcast.
Right. Right.
The mind is expanded. We did one about masculinity and femininity. Yes. That I still believe is probably one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. And it's one of those things I make a joke, you get on and you're about 3 minutes into the podcast and you're like, oh, I better bring my big boy pants today.
Right.
The conversation just got elevated in another
you got to be warmed up. You got to be limber and warmed up and ready to go. Because it's going to be full on cracking. The brain's got to be ready to work.
100%. So Eric, what I like to do with my guests is kind of let them start their story where they want to, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, in fact, almost to the day, mid-July of 2021, I left a corporate career to start my own thing in the coaching space and consulting space. I'd found that throughout my career, I'm 55 years, I turned 55 this summer. And so it's not like I've woke up at 28 and said, this isn't for me. I mean, it took me 30 years to kind of work through a lot of stuff. And I had a lot of corporate success and some great relationships, learned a lot of great things. But I found myself continuing to have what would be kind of visible success, financial success, promotions, escalation and responsibility and title and all those things. And yet I really wasn't feeling fulfilled by that. And when I hit 50 years old, I started to look and say, well, I'm sort of coming toward the final, third of my career here, right? I got 15 years or so to go. What do I really want to do? What am I about? Am I in the right space, or have I just sort of found myself here through, one step this direction, one step that direction, and then you build a career out of that. And so, I hired my first coach. We were talking about Rick Alexander. So I hired Rick I was listening to Rick's podcast at the time called Morning Coffee. And I went through one of his programs, Clarity Academy, and then hired him as a coach and started for the first time really dig into myself and understand, what am I about? What am I here on the earth to do? What was I put on the earth to do by my creator? And what is the bigger plan for me? Am I even following it? And am I in line with my values? What are my values? I started to really dig into that through my work with Rick. And after a couple year process there, I stepped out of my corporate life. I was chief marketing officer for a healthcare company at the time. And I decided I wanted to coach others through a similar process that I had gone through to understand what they were put on the earth to do. So I started a coaching practice 2 years ago. And so I coach individuals one-on-one right now is what I'm kind of doing on the coaching side, men and women both. And often they're at a crossroads similar to what I found myself at, where they're asking themselves questions like, am I doing what I should be doing? Am I doing what I want to be doing, what I was put on the earth to do? And I help them navigate through that. And what I found is it's super gratifying, right? I love the work with people. That's one of the things I came away with in my work was I found my best days were when I was interacting with others, when I was working in teams, when I was helping the team to succeed, but not always necessarily leading the team. I didn't take satisfaction from being the kind of person in the spotlight. I was more into seeing and helping others achieve what they were put on the earth to achieve, or achieve at a higher level. And so that to me said coaching. It said coaching and mentoring. And I've been blessed with learning a lot of things. I've worked for some great companies early in my career. I was with Ernst and Young and then Deloitte and Touche. And so great consulting organizations that taught me a lot of things that now I get the ability to share with others, as well as life experiences that have gone along with, a few years on the planet. So, so that's kind of a summary of maybe an initial statement.
So there is a lot of people out there that want to change. They might even do the work to change, but they don't change, or they don't shift, right? The joke with me when you come coach with me is a couple things are going to happen. You might get divorced because it's probably coming already. You might fall back in love. You might move to Europe and you might travel, or you might leave your job. Like, it's like, I think that most people come to a coach when they're kind of out of ideas for themselves. And I think as my coaching has matured, which I'm sure yours has, do you, I had one of my first coaches ever tell me, he's like, you never have to worry about looking for clients. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, you only coach what you've been through. And when he said that, I was like, okay, I get what you're saying. Like, what was the catalyst for you besides having a coach kind of finally make the decision at that time in your life to really spend the back half of your life doing something for yourself?
Yeah, I think it was because I was having some of the highest level of financial success that I had in my career. And yet I had never felt more sort of empty, right? Never felt more dissatisfied or unsatisfied. And I'd always assumed that with more and more financial success would come more and more satisfaction and comfort and safety and security and all these things. And yet I found that I just wasn't seeing that. In fact, it was sort of the opposite. As I was stacking up the visible wins professionally, I was feeling less and less aligned with my professional work. And great relationships at home, great relationship with my wife. My wife and I have been married. We actually had our 30th anniversary this past May. So felt really strong there, but I just felt like the career was weird. It was because everything was pointing to, you should be really happy. Everything should be lined up right now. You should be feeling great. And I wasn't. And that, when I dug into like, why would that be? What I found was just I was out of alignment with values, with my internal values, what make me feel inspired. Right. And so it wasn't, even though and again, this came a lot from some of the work I did with my coach and my coaches, was understanding some of the stories that have been impressed upon me or imprinted on me from childhood had a lot to do with desiring safety and security, even though they really weren't my stories. They were more my dad's stories, because my parents grew up, especially my father grew up extremely poor. And so he had this real need for safety and security, and, having any financial resources was super important to him. And he sort of imprinted that on us, which, I understand completely why. Right. And yet I found myself really living sort of his story more than my own, right? Thinking that, money is going to make you happy because it's going to make you feel safe. And it never really, even though I never wanted for anything, whereas my dad did, I felt this need to, I've got to acquire assets because it's going to make me feel comfortable and safe. And it didn't. And so I had to sort of unroot some of that stuff and look into, where did it come from, first of all? And was it really my story, or was it someone else's? And then once I understood that it really wasn't my story, well, what is my story? What does give me satisfaction? What am I? What do I feel good about? And again, it had a lot to do with others, with working with others. And then a faith component, really. I've had a strong faith really for most of my life, but I would say, especially in the last 25 years or so. And I went on a men's retreat back in 2001 that I remember to this day, that really sort of lit my faith on fire. And I've lived that, but then I've had periods of not living it. Right. And over those years, and through this work, I really started to assign and understand, it's not just some random miracle that I'm here. I was intentionally put here. If you look at the odds of being born, they're infinitesimally small, right? It's like 2.7 million to the trillionth power or something. If you look at, because, two people had to get together for you to be here, and then two of their people had to get together, and you take that all the way back to the beginning of time. And if anybody doesn't make that chain, if anybody dies of an illness or gets killed in a war or whatever, and that chain gets broken, you're not here. So the reality is the odds of you being here are super small, but I don't believe it's just random odds, right? I don't think it was just like, we just got lucky, right? I think we were intentionally put here by a creator. And so then I thought, well, if the creator put me here, if God put me here, he had an intention for me, right? He had something in mind. And it's scripturally based, right? The whole notion that God knew you in your mother's womb. He knows every hair on your head. And so I started to think, well, if he knows every hair on my head and he intended for me to be here, why? What did he want me to do? Like, what did he design me for? And so that came out as well. And it's really led me to lean more into my faith. And then that sort of comes through in my coaching as well. And you don't certainly have to be necessarily a believer, but this idea that there's a purpose for you. You have a purpose on this planet. If you believe that you were just randomly, atoms crashed together and you were here, well, then still there's a purpose, because, man, you just won the ultimate lottery. You hit that 1 trillion to 1 odd deal. So why? Like, what are you going to do with the 72 years that you're given on the planet? Right. And then, are you spending that time wisely? So you get a very short period of time here. So helping to dig into that purpose. So that came out as well for me. And it's led to some other things that kind of been placed in my path. You're an entrepreneur, and I never was, right? I did 30 years of corporate America. And so the entrepreneur train has been a wild one. It's more of a roller coaster than a train, right? It's not a track, but it's not necessarily a train ride.
It's a special appetite.
Yeah.
This is what people don't get. I would say, the number one issue that I deal with my clients among just loving themselves, right? At the root of everything is switching out from W-2 to owner.
Yes.
Right. And they see so much freedom in it, but yes, there is freedom, but there's also a lot of not freedom, right? And I think, one of my tricks with entrepreneurs is you need to define what you're willing to not do. It's not what you will do, it's what you won't do.
Right.
And it took me a long time to understand that if I control my lifestyle and I pack in business around what I truly believe in my core, then I can create something that actually is going to make me happy instead of chasing the almighty dollar. For me, it's a really weird scenario. I could tell you where I was. I could tell you what happened. It was a couple years into my coaching, and I was only coaching on Mondays, and I still do that. And I had a full roster. I was very busy, but I was making, double six figures, working 4 days a month. And I go, is this it? Is this it? This is what I've told in my entire 38-year life. This is what I was driven to. This doesn't make any sense. And then I realized this can't be it. I've got to do something more that's going to impact me bigger. And that's when the bigger vision started coming in. And it was that aha moment that you got the thing that everybody's supposed to say. And I'm working 20 hours a week, and this is it. Right. And I was like, what am I going to do for the other 5 days, the other 6 days, And so that's what kind of started me on a different path when I realized it had to be something more. Now there is something very exciting to know that you created that from hard work, but ultimately I think that we need to, I've never understood, me personally, I've never understood the word retirement. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Even my dad, who was a dentist for 46 years, who sold his practice, now does investing with real estate as in a mastermind that they go on calls every week. So he's still in something.
Right.
I don't understand this notion of sitting on the beach and disappearing. This is not I was off for the last 4 or 5 days, kind of laying low at the house because we just had a long couple of months. And I was gnawing at the side of the house to get out and get into workspace.
Right.
It's just my fiance, my parents is I think you need to go to work.
Yeah, go do something. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that too? You almost more busy than when you were corporate?
Way more busy. And it's figuring out when to shut it off has been a challenge because I just kind of work.
When you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah. Just 7 days. It's just all the time because it's just so easy, especially now with technology the way it is. It's just so easy to jump into work. It's I've got a couple hours. I'm just going to jump in to do something. And then you look up 6 hours later,
Well, one of the things I was talking about with a client this morning, I was talking to my COO, is I realize as I continue to gravitate higher and higher up on the scope of responsibility and how many employees we have and such, is that my health and my sharp decision making is what I get paid for now. Now I'm still having trouble that I don't get to have a lot of the fun anymore because now I deal with lawyers and HR and big acquisitions. But I'm realizing if I'm not healthy, if I don't take that time, then I don't have a clear mind to make that decision. And that is kind of been my focus for the next, it's been shifted everything. It was all drive, work, 80 hours a week. Now it's the opposite. Do you take the time to clear your head so you have a clear mind? Yes.
Yeah. That's been a learning thing for me as well. The idea that, I'm sharper if I allow myself more breaks. I actually can get more work and better work done if I allow myself more breaks and more. I do a lot of, I like to exercise, work out, and going for a run or doing a workout or doing something and then coming back and getting, good work in right after that is better than just grinding away at the computer for 6, 8, 9, 10 hours. Those last few hours are sort of dead, right? There's just nothing there. Nothing's happening.
I have a rule after 4:30 in the afternoon, I'm done. Meaning I might have a meeting, but let's say it's mind crunching stuff because I just, I get up at 4:30, I'm going, I work at 6. I just can't make decisions at that point. I've made too many decisions. I put out too many fires, and knowing that about yourself and more importantly, giving yourself the grace to do it. Yes. Is so important, which is super hard for doer. We're dealing with something different right now, right? We own HVAC, plumbing, electric companies. I've got guys who have been in the game for 30 years who I need to move up to management. And I ask them to supervise, and they can't not swing a hammer, and it's driving them crazy.
Right. Yes.
And I'm like, guys, I love you, but you're like 55. You've got to learn how to like point and not be climbing through rafters.
Right. Yep. Did you ever see, you see the movie Band of Brothers? It was a HBO series.
I haven't. No, it's the second time it's been recommended to me in the last like week.
Yeah, you got to see it. There's a great scene I don't know, it's somewhere, it's about an eight episode series, I think, something like that, 6-8 episodes. And one of the main characters is Winters, a guy named Winters. His last name is Winters. He ends up being I can't remember his rank, but he starts off as just either a private or very low, and he ends up very high, captain, I think. And when he makes, he's getting all these battlefield promotions because it's World War II, and that happened very frequently. Get promoted very quickly, and he got promoted. He was an excellent soldier, great shooter, great sort of battlefield commander in small units, and he gets promoted. Now his rank is such that he's sort of in the back observing with his higher up, right? And they're observing this battle going on, and the units getting pinned down. They're not moving like they should, and he's frustrated. He's trying to call radio commands and get the team to operate like it should. The guys are getting hurt, getting shot, and at one point he grabs his rifle and takes off and takes 2 strides towards the battlefield, and his commander says, "Stop." Like, no, like that is not your role anymore. You have to figure out how to lead these men from back here. You are not to go out forward with the rifle. And he's just pissed because he's like, that's what his instinct is to do. Is just give me my rifle. I'll go fix this problem myself. And he's told, no, you got to stop. You got to do it from here with the radio. And so he learns to do it. Right. But it's that thing. It's that idea that I'll fix this with a hammer because I'm trained to use a hammer. I know how to make this better.
My favorite guys I study is a billionaire, multiple companies, down to earth guy. He says, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Right.
That's right.
And I love it. It's like, it's such a poignant conversation, because my joke is the better you get at cooking, the farther you get away from the kitchen.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so now we're having grace and understanding that our identity is shifting, and it's going to take a while to step into that. You have to make peace with it. You have to, I find that a lot of the things that I want to do, and I've done enough work, but I find a lot of the things that I want to happen are because of my ego. Like, I recruited a guy to the company that used to work here, right? And he's been doing great, and I want to give him a raise. And I was going to give him the raise because he trusted me and he came to work with us. And then my COO goes, yeah, but don't you think his manager should give him the raise? And like, for like 5 minutes, I'm like angry as fuck. I'm like, dude, like, I want to give him the raise. He trusted me, and I'm the one that had, and he goes, yeah, I get that, but think about it. And so I did what I always do, which is mow. My favorite thing to do is mow. So I was mowing, and I was thinking about it. I was like, you know what?
Nice.
I was like, in order for us to go to where we want to, like, you're right. It does have to be his internal manager that has to see it, reward it. And man, that's like the next tier up. We've entered a new realm.
It's tough, man. I mean, so, what you just described, and I want to ask you, you said mowing, and so you a rider or a walk behind, or what do you got?
Both, all the above. So I don't know if I bought the company and the land underneath it because of how big the field is, or if I bought it because of the business. But
Right.
It's a nice, the warehouse guy goes, I don't like mowing. I said, don't worry, I got it every week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Mowing is great. It's all the edge work that I can't stand. Now I have a house now where I don't have to mow. The community mows it for me, but mowing and straight lines and all that stuff, man, it's super. Yeah, it's meditation. The idea of the world I'm sort of in right now is solopreneur, right? It's me. And I find myself, I love to work, right? I love it. I get satisfaction from it. I love to work out, right? So I love physical stuff. And then to me, work is sort of the mental application, mental/physical of that realm as well. And I love it. At the same time, you can kind of burn yourself up in this world, because I'm like, I'll do this, and then I'll do a little of that, and a little of this other thing. And it's like, I just sort of a kid in a candy store as far as like, oh, I'll take that project. I'll do that. Well, I'll do that. I'll do that. And this idea of niching down and being very narrow, and then hiring other people to do other things, right? Or doing less. That's a challenge as well, right? That I've had to kind of figure out, like, how do I outsource some of this stuff off of my plate? I like to own it. I like to see it get done. I like to feel it get done. And yet there's only so much you can do as an individual, right? And the idea of putting in people and systems to run aspects of the business is a challenge, right? Yeah.
I got 50 employees. So just at this company, it's a thing. Let's just put it this way, because my trick, right, is I kind of come up with ways to like do it. I let the business dictate how I behave sometimes. Okay. And what I mean by that is like the scale of the business does not allow me to micromanage everything. I can't. Yeah. We do 60 projects a day. I can't. I don't, it's not possible. But I have a rule. The rule is if it gets through to me, I own it. Meaning if a customer's upset, I don't care if you want to fix it. That got to me, I'm dealing with it.
Right.
If a project doesn't get finished the right way and they got past the project manager and the manager, then I'm owning it. You're fucked. You're done. You're done. If it got to me, I'm handling it because that's my job. But what I try to teach them is that we create a society. This is the biggest issue. We create a society so scared of failure and mistakes.
Yes.
I love mistakes. Like, what are you going to fail at this week? Like 3 of the guys I've hired for like manager roles, like project manager roles recently, are young guys. They don't have the experience. I told them to their face in the interview, you're not qualified for this job. Now, what are you going to do about it? And they have exceeded my expectations. They've made mistakes, but they learned quickly. And I think that one of the things I hope I bring to this world, just in general, and what I hope my podcast does, is allow people to fail, but also try something they never tried before. My favorite question I ever get is, who do I have to become to be on your podcast? That's what people text me sometimes. Because I listen to it. I go, how about next Tuesday?
Yeah.
And they're like, what? I've been sitting on that question for like 6 months and you just fixed it. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because like I find, because now they tell me, okay, well, I did that. I can do anything. And we chat, especially in corporate America, we chastise people, right? And more importantly, you know, everybody knows those people, because I worked in big high-end restaurants and hotels. Everybody knows those people who just does enough not to get fired.
Right.
And they just do enough. They cover their ass. And we've lost individuality. We've lost everything. This is what I say to everybody. Everything that I got chastised for in high school, everything I got in trouble for, got sent to timeout, almost got sent to military school, is things that they champion me for now. Oh, you can network. Oh, you can talk to in front of people. Oh, you know people. Oh, you're charismatic. Oh, all these things is what they sit down, shut up. You don't do this. Right. You know, if it wasn't for a friend's dad who gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad at 17, I don't know if I would have got where I am. And there was drug addiction and alcoholism and all that stuff. And it doesn't matter. But nobody's allowed to be themselves anymore. And that's what I can't stand. It's like, you know, you do your first podcast. Oh, the lighting's bad. This picture's bad. It's like, dude, okay, great. And guess what? I've done 800 podcasts in 4 years. And guess the first one, I don't know who that guy was, right. But on podcast 800, I mean, wow, that guy's learned a lot. And right. And I just champion, you know, that kind of thing. And somebody such as you, like I found, and I'll just be frank, I found it very hard to coach men over 50. For me, it's like not that they don't want to change. It's not that they aren't willing to change. It's that they refuse to change because their life is too comfortable.
Yeah, totally.
And so the moment that, and I tell them flat out when I talk to them, week 6 and 7, when we coach, you're going to want to fire me and you're going to want to walk away. It's up to you whether or not we continue. Right. And they're like, no. This is what they say. And I'm like, dude, no, it's the truth. Because if I'm coaching a 21-year-old kid who's just getting started and he don't have anything to lose, he's going to run through a brick wall. If you got the guy with the house, the boat, the kid, the wife, and everything, and he's making double 6 figures, it's going to be a little tough.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing more dangerous than a desperate man, right? I mean, and so a desperate guy, change is like, well, I have no choices, right? No choices. But a guy that's comfortable has plenty of choices. It's easy to stay put. And it's literally human nature to not change, right? Change is hard. You can plan about it, talk about it, fantasize about it, think about it. But the action step is the hard step, right? Especially when you've got other options and you've built, like you said, a comfortable life and expectations and obligations, commitments, all that stuff. What you said a minute ago.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, about failure being a great teacher and like excited to have people fail. That's becoming more of this kind of, this thing that you'll read. It's like a meme almost, like, oh, failure's great. I'm like, yeah, then get in the failure, right? See what that actually is. And if you're saying to your team or yourself, man, failure is a good thing. It's a blessing. It teaches me more than winning. But then when you fail, you hammer yourself or you hammer your team, the messages are crossed, right? The reality is it's the other one that I've gotten tired of, which is the whole get comfortable being uncomfortable. Guess what? Being uncomfortable is uncomfortable, right? It feels bad. That's why it's called uncomfortable. So to just slap a word on top of it and say, just get comfortable being that way. It's like, no, you've got to take that to a different level and you've got to really understand what you're saying there. Same thing with the whole idea of enjoying or appreciating failure. And there needs to be a process. You need to have a process for saying, well, let's just break this down. Let's take the emotion out of it. Let's understand where we came up short. What did we do well? Where did we come up short? And what would we do differently? Like, why did that happen? And what would we do differently? And analyze it and then just move on, right? But it's hard because human nature is anger, right? Ego steps up and people we didn't really fail. They want to deny a failure or whatever, or make excuses for why it happened. And it's not my fault and all this other stuff. Right.
There's a book called Good to Great that Jim Collins wrote. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. When I read it, I was like, okay, because it debunked it. But one of the chapters is called Radical Brutal Honesty, like brutal facts.
Yeah,
like addressing brutal facts of like your situation. It's like Les Brown is one of my favorite speakers of all time, and he says, I've never met a big bone skeleton.
Big bone skeleton.
Yeah, it's my favorite line he's ever said, right? Because he talks about his friends would always say like, oh, I'm just big boned.
Big boned.
I can't lose weight. And he goes, well, I never met a big boned skeleton. Right. And it's the truth, right? Because we create so many reasons why, and you'll get what we talked about before we came on. My fiance is extremely spiritual. Taught me a lot about life, had a crazy childhood. And I tell everybody the same thing. You know what she taught me more than anything? She taught me that the rain was beautiful too.
Yes.
And people don't get what I mean when I say that sometimes, but I spent most of my life as a front runner. Meaning if the weather was shining and I was making money and there was no problems, I was great. But the moment anything went sideways, I was a nightmare to deal with. I was angry. And when I got with her and we were in Colorado and I was hoping to enjoy the day and then it rained, she goes, wow, it's so beautiful outside. And I went, what?
Yeah.
And it's just such a metaphor for life that we label things good, bad, or indifferent when they're all great.
Yep. 100%. That our hardest lessons often teach us the most. And so that the thing we end up being most grateful for, and yet in the time that it's happening, we're upset about it, right? And not to be trite, but you hear people having some of the most devastating illnesses and they come through it and they go, man, I wouldn't change it. Like it made me better. Like I'm a different human now than before I had that illness. And I wouldn't reverse it if I could. And you think, golly, so when you're going through some trial in life, if that's the attitude, if in hindsight, you're going to go, this is the most important moment of my life, and I learned so much from it and I wouldn't change it, then why won't we just accept it when it's happening, right? Take the attitude of, this is actually, I'm learning something here. What am I being taught in this moment? Like, what am I learning in the rain, and sitting in it? Rick would talk about that, the idea that often it's like when you put your hand on a hot stove, the reaction is, I'm just get my hand off of it. Right. So when you're in some trial, like, I just want to be out of it. Where's the nearest exit? How do I find my way out of this problem? Instead of just going, just sit in it, just sit in the muck for a minute.
Is it going to teach me in business? I'll use business to make it easy for everybody. Like, is it going to teach me to get resourceful, or is it going to teach me to cower? Right. Yeah. And I used to be in Arte and Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. He taught Andy Frisella when the economy was shifting about a year or two ago from COVID. He they do private calls once a week. And he said, he's not really involved in his multi-billion-dollar company anymore, but he's still on the board. And guy CEO meets and he says, okay, so we're going to scale back our marketing. We're going to lay some people off. And Ed goes, no, you're not. And he goes, I don't understand. He goes, no, you're going to take out a $5 billion loan. He goes, you're going to double down. You're going to hire our competition who's letting people go. He's like, you're going to pick them up. He's like, we're going to expand our marketing and we're going to take the market share. When everybody else is cowering, we're going to go right into the storm and we're going to thank ourselves 5 years from now. And that was like, okay, that's how you handle adversity.
Yep. 100%. You lean into the storm, like it's a buffalo mentality, right? The buffalo mindset.
I told that to my masseuse. He thought it was the greatest thing in the world. He's like, he goes, which one are you? I said, the motherfucking buffalo.
That's right. See over my shoulder, the buffalo in the storm, right? The face full of snow. It's
what? I've actually never shared this story on my podcast. Do you want to share this? What the story?
So the idea is that when a storm approaches a prairie and you've got a herd of buffalo out there, buffalo see the storm coming, they line up and they go right into the storm. And then they basically rotate the lead buffalo and the others get behind the lead and they weather it together, but they battle through it and they get through the storm quicker by going directly into it. Whereas cows run from the storm and they scatter and they run from the storm and the storm overtakes them. And they're in it a lot longer because they're literally running with the storm while it's going over the top of them. They think they're running away from it, but they're sort of running with it. So they're in the storm longer. It's more devastating. Right? Is that how you would summarize it?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. So if people are in a corporate job or they're kind of stuck where they are, what's your kind of tips for them to get started and kind of move in the other direction?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, it took time getting quiet. I had to get quiet with myself. I had found some resources. I loved listening to podcasts. And so I was listening to a lot of podcasts around development and growth and found an individual in Rick that I connected with. He loves to do endurance sports. I do as well. And so we connected on a variety of levels. And then I hired him to kind of help me figure some things out. And really it started for me with values, understanding what's important to me. So I would say do some of that introspective work, get quiet, spend time with it. If you think about all the time you spend, if you're a corporate guy or gal, think about all the time you spend on your job and then think, how much time am I spending on myself? Am I spending any time on myself, trying to understand myself better? And if the answer is no, or very, very little, then and you're feeling frustrated, then probably the first thing to do is spend some more time thinking and looking within, like what's really important to you, understand what your value set is. What is your vision for why you're on the earth, right? Why are you here? Whether you're put here divinely or not, why are you here? What are you hoping to get done before your time's up? And is it, if you're out of alignment with what that is, if your life ended today, would you be excited about what your eulogy would say? Would you be happy with that? And if the answer is no, what do you want your eulogy to say? And then what do you have to do to make it say that, make that happen? And so start putting those plans in place. Again, when I talked earlier about certain things have come in my way that I wouldn't have anticipated, right? So I talked about the endurance sports stuff. And so a group out there, Turning Point USA, put together a men's summit, which is a men's discipleship program, right? It's a Christian men's kind of rite of passage. And I was part of the early formation of that group. And they just this past spring, they asked me to lead it. So now I never would have anticipated that 2 years ago, but it is in completely in line with my value set and with my vision for why I'm on this earth, why I was put here, is to lead and to feed and to pour into others and to help them understand their place on this earth, help them figure that out. Right. So started doing that. And so now we do these multi-day out in nature, do some hard physical things, and then, kind of tap into why were you divinely put here? Again, that wouldn't have come about had I not taken that first step in leaving and stepping out into the unknown, leaving a corporate thing that I knew like the back of my hand into the world of entrepreneurial coaching, right? A whole new thing, but it led to some new things.
I love that. Yeah, I love you have to get out in nature. It breaks down the walls. People are more open to share, right? I've helped a lot of people through addiction. Like, dude, I love some Zoom, but man, when you're in my city and we can walk and he's like, it just feels, the energy connects. So I couldn't agree more. So
100%.
important. So if people want to find out your podcast, they want to follow that, how do they do that?
Any of the podcast platforms. The show is called Return to Authenticity. Return to Authenticity. I interview guests that have made bold life pivots toward their authentic self, why they're authentically here on this earth. And so some great stories. I've had some fabulous guests. Would love to have you on, man. You got a great story. So you haven't
heard all of it.
Yeah. No, I've heard your show. I've heard you. I've listened to some shows. I did my homework. Yeah. You got a story.
I love it. Yeah. We got a story. I try to tell everybody, I got the 15, the 25, or the 45-minute version. It's up to you.
Right on. We'll take them all. I'll take the long one.
Yeah. I take the long one. You know, it's really odd, right? You know, coming up in January, it'll be 5 years sober, I think. And, you know, it's a joke with my friend who's beat cancer twice. And he said, you know, you beat cancer twice and you're supposed to be a millionaire. You know, and that's my joke with him. And he's like, no, I'm just really broke now, you know, and we get sober and it's like, oh, you're sober now. So it's just fine, whatever. No. You still have to go like create your life. And, right. You know, that only makes us stronger and it makes us easier to share our story. One of the things that I try to connect to is even though I've lost a lot of why I was drinking something, like I've moved on past that, I've done work. I try to never disconnect myself from the feeling of despair that I did have, because I never want to be so far away from the change that I don't know how to change others. Right. Yeah, and so like I hang on to a little bit of that. A lot of my content is centered around me talking to that 17-year-old, you know, and because my biggest issue with some of the people that talk in this space and do it is that I feel like they've removed themselves from what it was like when they got started. And so I try to share that part of my story as much as possible. Right on. I love it. Yeah, definitely would love to have you on as a guest, man. Be fantastic. I'd be honored, man. Well, guys, if you got some value from this episode, send it to a friend and we'll see you next time.